Welcome to Screen Quest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman, joined by May Finch.
Hey.
And of course, Will Rotondi.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going well. On today's episode, yes, we'll be watching the first of two films by Bong Joon-ho. The first of which is, of course, Snowpiercer, and then we will be watching Parasite for next week's episode, selected, of course, by May Finch. Very excited to get into all of that. We will, of course, be drawing a new side quest, but first, let's do a little catch up. It's been a hot minute since we have checked in with what we've been watching. Films, TV, it's all up for grabs. So I'm curious to hear. Will, I'm going to start with you first. What have you been watching, good sir?
Oh man, a ton of stuff. I finally caught up on Top Gun Maverick. I got into watching The Last of Us, which, oh, holy smokes, dude, it's great. I went and even saw that movie Megan about the killer robot, which was hilarious, and I love it, and I fully endorse it, and I'm so stoked they're going to do a sequel. And actually started catching up on an old TV show called Farscape for any sci-fi lovers out there who might like stuff around the 90s. That was something that I never really had been on the list to do, but had never gotten around to it. So that's been one of it I've been up to lately.
The only thing I know about Farscape is Abed in Community is talking to what he doesn't know is a gay guy at a bar, and the gay guy thinks he's flirting with him, and he's just talking about Farscape non-stop, and he's like, Jesus Christ, I've been trying to pick you up for like an hour. I don't care about Farscape. And Abed's like, whoops. So the little tidbits that come out of that, I've always been curious about it. It looks like a kind of a neat, like, it's what, like 2000s or 90s, right? Like sci-fi.
I want to say 90s.
Yeah,
I'd have to go back and check, but yeah, I want to say like late 90s. Probably around the same time stuff like Babylon 5 was coming out, because like
that kind of shit.
Yeah, because like the special effects kind of feel like the same. They're kind of on par with each other with that. And the costuming and everything is great. I mean, it feels like watching, like, if you liked Guardians of the Galaxy for all of the color that it's got and all the cool makeup, like, I think you would like Farscape.
Neat. Yeah, it's been on the list for a while, and I'm glad you finally saw Top Gun Maverick. Did I oversell it, or was it as like as described? Like I was ready to be disappointed after everyone hyping it for so long, and I just can't believe it.
No, it was beautiful. Like, it was what I wanted, and I was finally glad to see a movie that like didn't end on like a dour, bittersweet note, like without spoilers or anything. Like, it was what I wanted out of an action movie that was a sequel to something that was, even though it's been so long since, like, it hit all the right notes, man, for me, and I loved it. So I would definitely recommend it.
May Finch, how about you?
Well, I also need to watch Megan because everyone has been raving about it. And now that I have Will's endorsement as well, I have to see it. So that'll be on my watch list this week. This is an annoying answer, but I've been watching a lot of like form check videos on YouTube because I got back into weightlifting recently. My health has been finally in a good place for that. So yeah, my YouTube history is just like a bunch of buff ladies picking up heavy things. And that's been going great. And I haven't been watching much TV besides that. I did watch a bit of an anime series. It kind of has like Cowboy Bebop kind of vibes, called The Great Pretender. It's about a con artist. It's interesting. I didn't love the ending, but most of it's good. I would say stop after season 1.
It seems like that anime is either like that's sound advice, or it's like beware, because after season 1 there's like 20 more seasons, and it's worth getting through like 17 of them, but like they're all chopped up like One Piece. Everyone's always trying to sell beyond that. I'm like, no thank you, I don't have that kind of time, but I respect the hustle.
Yeah, I'm with you on One Piece there. I want to like it, but
along with Will, I have also been watching The Last of Us this last week. with no specifics whatsoever, was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Like, exquisite hour of television, but it fucking wrecked me. But it was just great. Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, I think is his name. Like, I think deserve some acting accolades. Just incredible stuff. And the show has continued to like really delight and surprise me with how faithful it is, but also when they make changes, like they really service the story, like, and don't feel like it's just a get out of jail free card of like, this is going to be hard to do in TV form from a video game. Meaningful changes all the way. Just love it. Let's see. I think I talked about Avatar: The Way of Water maybe the last time we talked, but in case I didn't, I really enjoyed that. Technically, it's amazing. It is better than the original Avatar, but I still wouldn't categorize it as like oh my god, like must see movie. It's must see in the theater movie just because of how technically beautiful it is. I'm down for a third. I don't know about a fourth and a fifth as is planned, but there you are. I went on a big old black and white binge and watched Raging Bull and Citizen Kane, which are two very different movies in some ways and very similar in others. And that was a nice little unintentional pairing there about two men who fuck everything in their life up through toxic masculinity. And that was a good old time. I really know how to manage stress. Apparently, I've been a little anxious if I'm giving you a little peek into my life, and so I'm like, oh, let's seek out like those kinds of movies. Like, I don't know what it is about my brain. But
I just thought you were really
comforting.
into like tragic heroes or anti-heroes.
I am. I find it oddly comforting. Maybe it's like it could always be like that, you know.
Yeah.
It could always be worse.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So yeah, that's what I've been watching. Always good to check in. Have you decided, are you gonna play the game or watch the show first for Last of Us, May?
Oh god, I keep going back and forth because the PC port doesn't come out till like March, but I do usually like to play the source material for a thing before I like read or whatever the adaptation. So it's I'm torn. Will, what do you think? I know Chris's opinion.
I think you should watch it.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally think you should watch it. It's worth it.
There you are. There's
I think I'll update the pod next week.
Judgment has been cast.
Just be in the right headspace. That's all. It's not always the happiest thing, but it has been beautiful. All right. Well, how about a side quest, and then we're gonna dive right into Snowpiercer, which I'm excited to talk about because it's been I think since the year it came out, since I've seen it last, and it was very cool to revisit that. So here we go. I'd like to think, which is basically based on whatever criteria you want. Talk about a film that has been influential in your life and, you know, a strong influence on loving movies, or maybe something that sticks out. It's a pretty loose category. I think I'm going to choose The Graduate for this one. The Mike Nichols, Dustin Hoffman film that really introduced me to my favorite era, which is New Hollywood and the turning point of cinema. It was this interesting little twilight zone for my young, you know, teenage brain to go, okay, there's classic films, and then there's like modern films, and then there's this, like, what is this era? You know, with like, there's like pop music on the soundtrack of Simon and Garfunkel, right? But everyone's so unhappy, and it has an unconventional ending that I won't spoil because it may or may not be on our you know, nominations list, and just a wonderful cast of characters, and just, it was like instantly different. It led me to other things like Midnight Cowboy and Easy Rider, and I kind of went down this rabbit hole at our little local library of all these films made in the same era, and kind of, it was like connecting the dots with directors and discovering all this great stuff. And even though I would say my grandmother is responsible for me like loving classic films and getting into movies as a whole, I think like the idea of like really getting into filmmaking and the different types of stories that can be told is probably owed, and wanting to study film probably more specifically to that film. Have you guys seen it before? Have you seen The Graduate?
I have not.
Nope.
Oh man. Well, again, I won't say whether or not it's on our list, but that might be kind of an answer in and of itself. It is like a really, really great movie, and I got to show it to Marianne pretty early on in our dating, and was a fun movie to like, always a fun movie to watch people's reactions to, I should say, because the way the narrative unfolds is a bit unusual and offbeat, and Dustin Hoffman is just so great, and so is Anne Bancroft, who plays Mrs. Robinson, is just a treat.
Since I have no commentary on The Graduate, I do feel obligated to mention that I named my Roomba Dustbin Huffman.
Dustin Hoffman, that's great. That's amazing.
Oh, awesome.
Well, hopefully someday you will get to watch it, and we can report back. But I'm going to turn it over to May Finch for her nomination, and to lead the discussion around the first of two films, Snowpiercer. So take it away, May. Hey, that rhymed.
We have to use that from now on. Okay, so yeah, a lot of people in the US are probably pretty familiar with Bong Joon-ho by now, but in case you haven't heard that name before, he is a South Korean Academy Award-winning filmmaker. His films have a characteristic dark humor and heavy social themes. Parasite is probably his most famous film in the US, but he's also known for Okja, The Host, Memories of Murder, Barking Dogs Never Bite, and of course, Snowpiercer. So Snowpiercer is a film that I guess ties to what I said a little while ago about like fantasy and running on vibes, because a lot doesn't make sense, I think, for the whole world building and setup and stuff. But it came out in 2013 and was based on a French graphic novel that actually came out in 1982. And I think it's a very interesting concept. And I guess I kind of wanted to start our discussion with like this world that we're brought into and kind of what you guys make of it. Basically, global warming, big problem. Internationally, I guess, people decided to try the geoengineering route, and it backfired massively, plunging the Earth into a catastrophically cold environment. And all of humanity is now on this perpetually running train, Snowpiercer. There are a lot of people on the train. I think there's around 100 cars on it. The tail of the train is physically and symbolically where the lowest of lower class live, and the head of the train is where Wilfred, who like owns the train and everything, lives as well. And plot wise, it goes about as you would expect. There is a rebellion in the tail of the train, led by Curtis, who is played by Chris Evans. And I say it's led by him. He like is kind of getting direction from this older character named Gilliam, played by John Hurt. There's more to their dynamic that is revealed later, but together they are pushing forward to the front of the train with the goal of taking the engine. They get help from Nam Gong Min Soo, who is the kind of like security expert from the train, played by Song Kang-ho, and his daughter. And as they're moving up through the doors, he's unlocking them, and you get some kind of mysticism happening as well with the daughter, who is apparently clairvoyant and can tell what's going on with the next doors as they're moving up the train. There's a lot of other things happening that we'll get into, but that's kind of the overarching plot. And Curtis does eventually make it to the head. Not all the characters do. And is surprisingly offered the chance to take over the engine because Wilfred is old and dying. Ends up not doing that because of a pretty horrific reveal about what was happening to the kids in the tail section. They're being used to maintain the engine of the train. And with Song Kang-ho and his daughter, just blows everything up. And the final scene is of Namgong's daughter and one of the children from the engine leaving the train, not dying immediately, and seeing a polar bear. So ironic and somewhat hopeful of an ending. But yeah, that's the probably too long plot summary. And what do you guys think of this really freezing cold world?
I think it's a good segue after watching The Matrix.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot of aspects to this film that are mirrored in Snowpiercer, or that I should say are mirrored in The Matrix, where it's about control and it's about systems of control that you think you have some autonomy. There's the question of predestination, or there's, free will, and which do you think is going to come out on top? And then the whole system gets, thrown into a loop at the very end, and you're not really sure what is going to happen afterwards or where things are going to go from there. I think it is very much, there are aspects of it that seem so theatrical and so, over the top that you have to just chalk it up to symbolism, because it's like, if you try to like ground this in some sort of reality, you're like, this doesn't seem real. But then again, ever since COVID, you know what? I'll buy it. Like, ever since, and I think we made that joke before, it's like, you know what, if you can prove to me that you can jump, like Chris said in the last one about the Matrix, like if you can prove to me you can jump from one building to another, all right, I'll believe that I'm in a simulation. I'll believe I'm in the Matrix. So but yeah, there are some fantastical elements to the story that it's sort of like, yeah, if we're trying to nitpick, but otherwise, yeah, no, I think it's very much in keeping with the same sort of dystopian control that people want to have over humanity. And yet at the same time, you see that nature is able to come back, perhaps. There is that hope that maybe regardless of what humans do to each other, the world will somehow heal itself over time, that the ice will melt and that animals will come back. So in some respects, I kind of enjoyed the ending of that we're all kind of on our own crazy train, and no matter what we do to ourselves, that the planet is gonna, I don't know, like the planet will be okay. That's my hope. But
the polar bears win in the end.
Man, that's the best Coca-Cola commercial I could ever hope for. So yeah.
Really could have gotten away with a product placement. Maybe the gel blocks like also had some Coke in them. Who knows? But I do like what you said about COVID, though, because I think a thing that appealed to me and made me more likely to believe or even like the kind of fantastical elements, especially the clairvoyance that a few of the characters seem to have, is the more crazy your world is, and however it is shifting quickly, like with this pandemic and other things going on, I feel like we're constantly going through like once in a generation events right now, and I feel like the more turbulent times you're living in, the more you're willing just to be like, okay, yeah, that sounds legit. let's go with that. So I feel like that does like lend some legitimacy to the craziness happening on the train. It's just how ridiculous the world already is at the start of the movie, which I like. But Chris, what were your kind of first impressions?
Yeah, I was just gonna add to like my tolerance for like believability in certain things is like completely shifted. Like, I'm not gonna say post-pandemic, because I mean technically I think we're still in the midst of all that, but post like isolation, like mandatory isolation and the world being shut down. But yeah, like I hadn't seen this since it came out, and in addition to the temperature, I find this to be a very cold world, like in terms of emotion and sort of just the general view of the world and necessity in general. Like certain things stuck out in my memory, like the source of the protein bars and the scene with the dude's arm out the window. But even like with that, like there were so many things that I'd forgotten about that are really sort of fucked up about the whole existence of this train and what it all takes to keep going. But it's a great movie to watch post Parasite in a lot of ways, because I see some themes that'll connect, and I'm sure we'll talk about that next episode. So I really enjoyed that, and kind of being like, ooh, like, this guy likes using space to like convey class differences and other things like that. And I think that like the fundamental word I would use, like besides being kind of fucked up, is like cool. Like this is just a neat idea, and it feels very much like a video game. Like each like sort of sequence is like, all right, you get to the end of like this car and you got like this boss fight, and here's the encounter with the dudes with the night vision glasses. And just the structure of it is really, really cool, despite it being kind of a downer place to spend 2 hours in. So I was glad to rewatch it. Had a good time.
Yeah, there's a lot of standout scenes for me as well. This was actually my first time watching it, even though it was my pick. I love Parasite a lot. I knew this had a lot of similar themes, so I threw it on the board. But I think I really appreciated, because I've watched other films from other directors that dealt with similar issues, like Elysium, for instance, where the characters leading the rebellion, the oppressed class, weren't as well fleshed out, and it made a film that like already is having to be like fairly heavy-handed on themes and messaging, like feel all the more two-dimensional. Whereas here, I really appreciated how well fleshed out like side characters were. Like we had Tanya and her boy, the other parent who lost his child. You had the daughter of the security expert. You have a bigger cast of characters. They're shown as like having, I don't know, unique lives before all this started. And I like that also there are artists. You can see musical instruments hanging on the walls in the tail section too. So like it gives a sense of humanity, I think, in extremely inhumane conditions. And we can talk about that in Parasite as well. But that was something that overall impressed me a lot about the film, because I think by nature of the subject matter has to be very overt. But I think there's a lot of subtlety in the window dressings, so to say. Another just general thing that stood out to me, I guess level wise, was the start of the machete scene with the fish and the and the fish blood. And I've heard an anecdote. I don't know if it's true, but apparently Harvey Weinstein was I think producer, or he had some role in this film, and he really wanted to cut that scene, and Bong Joon-ho didn't. He just like really liked how it turned out, so he made up a lie, and he was like, oh no, this is very emotionally important to me. My father was a fisherman, and this is a tribute to him. And Harvey Weinstein bought it. So he got to keep the scene.
That's great. That's like a Hitchcock maneuver right there. Like he used to do shit like that all the time to manipulate keeping stuff in. I love it. I hope that's true.
So Bong Joon-ho, if you ever listen to this, I'm just saying I'm really glad you got that scene in there. It really stood out to me.
Yeah, that is kind of like a nice almost like fulcrum point, right? Like, because that's what leads into the first class section or forward car section, whatever they call it. That's a weird like fulcrum, between where they've been, where they're trying to get to. And it's, I would imagine, like for some of the younger people, maybe the first animal that they've ever seen, right? Besides bugs, probably.
Yeah.
So, it probably seems very extravagant to do that. As just a weird sort of, this is what we're going to do to you. I don't know what the intention was, but yeah.
I mean, I think it was partly intimidation, partly flaunting the fact they could, waste a fish instead of eating it. And partly just to prove that the knives are sharp, right? Because they'd gotten that far because the guns had no bullets. So they're basically proving that they have lethal force now.
Seems a little symbolic too, in some respects. Like, well, depending on how much we talk into some of the reveal later, but I guess more specifically, and I apologize, I'm going to cough here in just a second.
Go for it.
Man, I love post-nasal drip. But the only if it makes me sound cooler, like a smokier voice. But I think it's interesting how like later they're talking about like they can only have a certain amount of fish for the upper class because they have to keep that certain equilibrium with what's there. So it's almost kind of foreshadowing to that
Mhm.
in that scene. And then also to the extent of the reveal at the end about the equilibrium for the entire train. But yeah, no, I agree. It definitely stands out. So even if you're not really sure what's going on or how to interpret it, like it's it's a very distinguishing moment, and I am glad that it was included.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that being sort of foreshadowing about like tying the fish to the population control of the people. That's some great insight there, man.
Yeah, I need to watch. I always feel like I need to watch Bong Joon-ho's films like multiple times because I think there is so much symbolism in every like little tiny detail. So that's a great catch. Um, yeah, but I don't have a particular order to questions on this. We're not going from tail to front on this one. We can
No.
hop around the train.
Please.
So yeah, we can talk about that reveal if you want. I would love to hear your take, especially on Gilliam's supposed betrayal and what you made of Wilford's kind of final monologue when Curtis finally confronts him / offer.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe him or not because I believe it's Gilliam that says earlier like don't let him speak, right? And
Cut
so
out his tongue before he gets out a word.
so you could interpret that as like he knows he's going to reveal the plan and he doesn't want to be betrayed, but also you could take it as a face value, which he doesn't know much about this guy, but he knows that like he's not to be trusted and he's got a silver tongue and may try to seduce you. So I'm at a bit of a crossroads on that. I think the sadder interpretation is definitely that it is more of a seduction and sort of him trying to save face and not have it look like he's just failed to suppress a rebellion. He's certainly not in a hurry to reveal what's keeping the engines running in that moment. And I think maybe the simpler explanation, would be that yeah, maybe that is like how they've, there's been consistent rebellion. She does have the chart with like the 70% of you are gonna die. There's some supporting stuff there. I don't know. I think either way it's fucked. It's probably worse for given that Chris Evans has just revealed to us in the prior scene like where his origins come from. It makes it all the more sad, I think. Um Also, I don't know, like, does somebody who would cut off like their limbs to feed other people, like somebody that would like give up like 70% of the population for control? I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer, which I feel like is a cop out, and I'm sorry, but I can't come down firmly one way or the other.
That's my line, Chris.
Well, I steal from the best, okay?
What about you, Will?
I think that I think there's good enough reason to think that he's part of the system. There's some sort of agreement. I mean, not just in the name itself. So like Gilliam or Wilford is basically William in some respects. Not to throw my name in there too, but it's
It
sort
was
of like
me all along.
it was, yes. Let them know. Yeah. But the I think if he's willing to sacrifice part of his body, his mind would understand the idea of like a certain percentage of people being sacrificed for the sake of the equilibrium of the train so that other people will live. So that to me, I could see as the rationale for his character. That however this arrangement came about, that they are both sides of the same coin. And yeah, I think that's where I could see that falling. That's at least based on what I have to work with the film. It's always possible it could be something else, and that there is sort of another little trick that we're never really shown. But that's the feeling that I got.
They do show the phone, I guess, on the wall too. Like they do reveal that
They
phone
do.
exists when he's talking to the guy that looks like no Frank or whatever from Barry, the guy that's got like alopecia. Yeah, but NoHo Hank is his name. Sorry, from Barry. Sorry if there's Barry fans that listen to the podcast. It's been a while since it's been on. Okay. So there's that, and I guess he does also kind of reveal that like he just told you that it's better to hold a woman with two hands. So maybe implies that there's been some information passed along. So
Yeah, I see evidence for both as well. With things like the fact that he knows certain specific words that Gilliam has said to Curtis. I'm also thinking this is supposed to be like a fairly advanced train, right? There's got to be microphones. There's cameras. Like there's got to be microphones. Like there can't be that many secrets or any secrets really, at least from people in charge. And we do see a very brief shot of what looks like a security monitoring room, right? So I don't think just the fact that he knows about that conversation really says anything. But I do put a lot of weight into how, like, directorially things are juxtaposed. So you do have that confession from Curtis right before this scene. And he is talking about just how important Gilliam is to him and his identity and his whole will for surviving and doing this thing, right? Like Gilliam is kind of the focus of that. And what does Wilford decide to say to him to try to break his spirit? Gilliam's a traitor. So it feels like he was just trying to break him, to me. That's the where I come down on it. I also feel like metaphorically, I do believe Gilliam could be, trying to portray someone who's constantly acting against like their class interests, for instance, in order to keep the status quo and keep things from getting worse, right? But I just in the world of the movie, like thinking a little bit beyond metaphor, I don't quite buy the betrayal. I think sure they probably were in contact from time to time, but I don't think it went to the extent Wilford wanted to, imply. Personally,
could be that it changes mind too. Like it's very possible that maybe like what he's saying is true to an extent, but like maybe Gilliam on this particular like instance was like ready to go all the way, so to speak. Maybe there was some regret there, and I don't know. Sometimes when you mix lies with truth, it's like the most effective kind of shit, maybe that's why it's hard to come down for me. So.
I think there's some truth to that as well. So we talked a bit about Gilliam and Wilford. What do you guys think about Curtis?
I think that confession at the end really rounds him out as a character in a lot of ways. It's a very stark contrast from hey, I'll give you the ball for an hour, with the little kid, and sort of this like softness and tenderness. And he seems very white knight for most of the movie. So to kind of reveal where he started off and came from, sort of the sins of the past, I like that character touch a lot. That being said, I had trouble sometimes getting past like the Chris Evans like ness of him, like at times. Like I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
You don't think that Chris Evans knows what babies taste like?
Oh Jesus, I hope not.
Armie Hansen probably does, but he's not in this movie.
Yeah. That's but like that's one of my favorite lines, because I thought like, oh man, chill me to the bone. Definitely this most recent time, and I'm sure it did the first time, but I'd forgotten about it. Like I hate that I know what that babies taste best. I hate that I know what humans taste like, and I hate that I know that babies taste best. And it's just like, oh Jesus. But yeah, like I liked his character a lot, but it's that last half hour I think that really kind of cements him as interesting or more complex than like the first hour and a half of the movie.
I do think that it is one of those things where you sort of wonder whether he is just, if he is a better leader because he doesn't want to be, that it's usually the people that seek power that abuse it the most. And so it's like he is the person that they need, even though he has such a, that we find out later, is such a terrible, history with it. Conversely, though, everybody who's with him, with the exception of like maybe two other people, don't really make it to the end of the train. So I don't know, it's hard to really to pin down, because it's like everybody's just trying to fight to be on top, and at the end of it, who's really left from it. But I do think it's interesting to see somebody who you have an impression of, and not having known their history, to think of them one way and then to find out later where they've come from and how they've evolved as a character. And so I think in some respects, at least at the very least of it, I find him to be a fascinating character for the sake of the story.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of a betrayal to the audience there too. And it again, juxtaposition, it kind of mirrors the betrayal that Curtis is feeling with Gilliam, right? Mm-hmm. You put all this trust into this person who is your white knight, and whoops, no, also did all these terrible things. So yeah, I love those two scenes just together. I was already enjoying the movie, but when that happened, I was kind of like, okay, now this is now this is a film. I also want to talk about like some cinematography and what makes this feel like a Bong Joon-ho film. But I have one more kind of, I guess, character plot story related question before that, and that is, if you're in Curtis's shoes, standing in that engine, what would you do?
So we're boiling it down to take the job basically, or blow the door, or can we get like more nuance than that?
And what you said, basically, take the job or blow the door, or a third secret option.
It's very video gamey as well. To get the secret ending, you gotta take a piece of sushi and hide it in your pocket, and at the right time hand it to somebody. Yeah, it's a tough choice. Can the third secret option be like pick a better place to fucking stop the train and blow it up in the goddamn mountains, like in Alaska or wherever they are? Like, because I feel like I would take the option to blow the doors, like if it was somewhere that was maybe like a bit more like shelter and shit nearby, but
not while part of the train is on a bridge and you're still moving at high velocity.
Yeah. I mean, like philosophically, like getting like off the train, if there was enough, if I felt like there was enough of a chance to survive outside of that, back to our Matrix discussion, I would probably give people the option, and certainly like would stop the train at least temporarily to let anybody like especially the people in the rear car, I feel like are like, fucking take our chances like out where we have room to spread out and some shelter. Maybe the first class fucks, want to continue to be first class fucks, and then here, like off on your way, everyone's happy. You can keep your fish and shit. Because like it doesn't really seem like anybody in the rear car has any particular like jobs or anything, right? Like there's no real function other than the kids for the perpetual motion machine. That's not really a perpetual motion machine.
Not that I'm aware of. I've not read the graphic novel yet, although I plan to. I think that it's basically just the metaphorical contribution of keeping the engine running.
Gotcha. Cool thing about the graphic novel, the person that did the illustrations is the one that actually did the charcoal drawings that you see all throughout the film. So there's a little tidbit. I happened to pause it at the right moment, and Amazon Video, where I rented it from, was like, here's a bit of trivia. And I was like, fuck, I didn't know that this thing did this. Like, I'd be pausing movies every 5 seconds here if I knew I could do this. But anyway, yeah, that's my answer in a nutshell. Stop the train, let people off if they want, and then go on.
All right, what about you, Will?
All right, Chris. So you're saying you would stop the train? You would actually hit the brakes, is what you're saying. You wouldn't blow the door, and you wouldn't take over as the conductor. You would just like maybe incapacitate Wilford and then like put the brakes down at a good stopping point.
And let the little lads and lasses that are down there, doing all their shit. Like
pull them out. Yeah, let the train just slow down and stop. Okay.
And I was just asking, it's your solution to fix this. You fucking brilliant genius. Like, I think that's also a betrayal for the audience, is like, because he's kind of implying that he's made a perpetual motion machine, right? And then when the fucking door, it's like the Wizard of Oz reveal of like, well, let's look behind the curtain here. But anyway, yeah, sorry, Will, didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
No, you're good, because honestly my answer would have been the same thing. It would be just to stop the train, just to find the brake. We don't have to tank the whole thing. We could just slow it down, maybe. But yeah, I think that's probably where it would fall. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would put to that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can understand that after having seen how everybody acts on the train, that it's tempting to want to just say, screw it, just blow everything up. But, then there's always the risk that you just kill everybody, which is kind of what it seemed like to happen, with the exception of like 2 people that come out of the train at the end. You don't really know about the fate of everybody else. And I think the director even mentioned, like when he was asked about it, that everybody else, at least in his mind, was dead. So it's, yeah. Nah, I'd have to agree. Find the break. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We don't have to continue the matrix of control, and we don't have to murder everybody. Just pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, you two are very sensible. My only the only reason that I hesitate to say the same thing is it did seem like they had a lot of people coming to kill them at any second, and time was of
That's
the
true.
essence. And so I understand the decision to blow the door, especially if you have grossly miscalculated how explosive your explosive device actually is. So I'm sympathetic to that. I think in the heat of the moment, I might have made the same decision, but ideally, cooler heads would have prevailed, and I would have pulled the brakes.
For sure. Yeah, it's a good point. They couldn't really close. They were trying to close the door unsuccessfully. Also, there was a little bit more urgency than there needed to be because they already lit the goddamn fuse. But I feel like maybe try to close the door and then hit the brakes. Like
next Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
the
the
world
TV
actually
show.
freezes over and we end up on a train, we'll know what to do.
Exactly. Don't eat the brown protein bars, please. It is not an RX bar.
Hey, at least it's not like people. I thought that was going to be the plot twist. I thought it was going to be like people in
It's
there.
not Soylent Green. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what were some defining features of this film as a Bong Joon-ho production? I mentioned earlier that he's definitely known for like dark humor and heavy social themes, which we've talked a bit about. I know for me, the biggest one is just kind of like action whiplash. Like it'll be a fairly quiet, normal moment, and then kind of out of nowhere, with no build up, there's going to be sudden violence or action. Again, we'll talk about that with Parasite as well, but that's kind of what stood out to me here. Is like you're kind of expecting violence, given that this whole thing is about a rebellion, right? But he still manages to surprise you in the moments that it does come out, especially like towards the end with the arm getting ripped off and all the people coming out and fighting. And I was glad that he still made me surprised in certain scenes.
I think the spacing of everything, you're in this very thin train car and you have to be able to visually, feel like you're in it, but also just how cramped everything feels, whether you're in the tail of the train or even when you're moving through and you're trying to imagine like what this has to be like for this ecosystem to exist in some of the different creative and almost fantastical ways that you're shown that when they get to the upper class. But I think, yeah, it was the idea of just being in this very cramped space, that claustrophobia that sets in, that then seeing how it brightens up with the same amount of space, give or take. It felt like it was the same amount of space, strangely, but it was like, just how it all changed when you got to to the head of the train. And then strangely enough almost felt like it became another prison at the head, where it's just Wilford by himself in his own world, with the exception of like his assistant randomly with the gun. But yeah, I think that to me was probably the most striking feature about it. And what I enjoyed the most was just being able to feel like you could still move around in this space as the audience and yet also experience just how like tight everything felt.
Yeah, the use of space and lighting did a lot of work for sure. Especially in just giving you a feel for the different rooms. Like if you contrast, even though ostensibly all these train cars originally looked the same on the inside, right? If you contrast like the kid schoolroom with the tail of the train, those have totally different feels to them, despite being on the same train.
Yeah, so wealth disparity, certainly like a thematic element, and cinematography wise, kind of using the space, speaking of which, to kind of illustrate that as being sort of like there's a very clear distinction between the two sections of the train. So I really like that. I think sort of and I haven't seen all of the hosts. Like it's probably a movie I should try to go back and watch because I thought it was ridiculous. The first I tried to watch it as like just a horror movie, the like monster movie, and I was not having a good time, but I wasn't really familiar with like his work and thematics. But both in Parasite and this film, you sort of have like this invasion like of like the wealthy like folks by the like people that are struggling, and they upset the balance. And then there's in both of these films sort of nature as like this impartial third party, so like the flood. Again, we'll talk about that in Parasite, and sort of just the outdoor conditions in general in this film as being sort of like the great equalizer between the two in some ways, and then in others, like again we'll talk in Parasite, like not so much. I think he has a bit of a change of heart in that, but in at least in Snowpiercer, Mother Nature seems to be impartial. And I like that. I think it's an interesting sort of take on it, but in particular the use of space for sure. There was something else too that oh yeah, so speaking of space too, I think like just somehow, even though like the train is like the same width, the front cars feel so much more spacious. Like there's so much more empty space that's immediately noticeable. Like you think like the opening shot of everybody like standing shoulder to shoulder being counted and like kind of sitting down, what their bunks look like, to just like two people and like a big giant jacuzzi like tub thing. And of course, it's even remarked upon when Chris Evans is standing in the the midst of the heart of the engine, and he's like, "Oh, you've never been alone." Like that might be the most extravagant thing on the train. It's just solitude, which I'm being a little cheeky here, made me wonder, like, boy, it must be tough going on a date on this fucking thing. Like, not much in the way of privacy for courtship. So, yeah. But yeah, that's some of the things I kind of connected now having seen this after Parasite, which helped.
Yeah, I like what you said about Mother Nature as a largely impartial third party, although the only reason it's freezing cold is because humans fucked up, right? So right. Maybe it's impartial to the class war, but it's not impartial to humanity.
No, certainly not. Yeah, for class disparity for sure, wealth disparity, sure.
Yeah. The only other thing I guess I noticed, and I wanted to add to my earlier comments, with like the sudden action and sudden violence, the egg scene was amazing.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's just like so charmed, and it feels so off. And then they put out the guns, and it's like, okay, now we're back to the regularly scheduled slaughter. So yeah, that was very Bong Joon-ho. And then I think the only other thing is just I noticed this a lot with Parasite, which we'll talk about later, but there's a lot of texture, I think, to the film that I like. And a lot of action films have a lot of CGI and a lot of airbrushing of people and things. And I like how this film just felt like there was a lot of texture to all the different areas. Like you can kind of like feel the grime in the grimy areas, and in like the really pretty places, everything feels very tactile as well. Again, I don't know exactly how he got that effect or why it stood out so much to me, but it was nice and grounding in a otherwise fairly fantastical film.
Oh, like it certainly feels gross when it needs to feel gross, and extravagant when it needs to feel extravagant. I agree.
That's all I had prepared. Do you guys have any other comments for Snowpiercer?
I don't.
Concerns?
I'm very excited to talk about Parasite in connection with this. And like I've been trying to kind of hold back a little bit. The temptation is certainly there to say more about the next film, but I imagine in our next conversation we'll link back to some of the stuff here and kind of, draw some conclusions and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna keep it zipped for now.
We're gonna draw all the conclusions. Don't worry.
Or jump to them like in Office Space. Maybe I'll make a jump to conclusion thing on the board.
Nice.
You
Yeah.
should. Will, do you have any final thoughts?
I think that about covers it.
Alrighty. Can I interest you guys in a game?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Please.
All right. I don't know why I said that kind of creepy. Sorry.
Would you like to play a game?
All right. So I have a trivia game. I have another one planned for next week that's going to be trivia related to both films, but this is just related to Snowpiercer and its source material. So I have not read the graphic novel, but I have read about the graphic novel and came up with 5 questions for you two. Each question is worth 1 point, and you will see who the victor is at the end. I think I already gave you a bit of background info. It's a French graphic novel published in 1982. Have either of you read it besides the pages that appeared in the film?
Nope.
Cool. And it was originally titled, and I'm going to butcher this, Le Transpercenier.
Sounds good to me. I
Nailed it.
take French, but like 1 year in high school, so perfect.
Yeah, I'm making my college French teacher very disappointed, but it's okay. Question 1. The train in Snowpiercer is around 100 cars long, but the train in the novel is even longer. How many cars did the original Snowpiercer have? The closest answer wins.
Price is Right rules or just the closest in general?
Closest answer.
Okay, just making sure.
So the film version has around 100 and the novel has more.
Will, would you like to go first or do you want me to go first?
I'll say 150.
150 for Will. All right.
I
Chris?
am going to say 300. I'm going to go big.
All right. So in the graphic novel, the original Snowpiercer has 1,001 cars.
Wow. Jesus.
If you thought that the movie was fantastical, he dialed it down, actually.
How long did it take him to get to the head of the
It's a lot of cars.
train?
It's a lot of cars.
Yeah,
So that is a point for Chris.
Woohoo.
Nice.
If they're like 100 meters a piece, that's a lot of meters. I'm bad at math, so.
Editor Chris will just have to put the math on the screen somewhere.
Look right over there. Yeah.
All right. Question 2. Which movie character do you think is most closely adapted from their book counterpart?
Anybody?
Promise I'm not cheating. I'm just looking up character names. I only have.
I know, yeah. It's like
Wikipedia up for.
Please help me.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to remember their name. But yes. Okay. I have an answer. I'm going to say Mason, Minister Mason, the Tilda Swinton character. Just because I also
talk about Tilda Swinton.
I love them. I know. Agree.
What about you, Will?
I'm gonna go with Gilliam.
Okay. That was a trick question. I was mean. None. These are all originally like movie characters. None of them actually come from the book.
God damn. All right. Wow.
But I would have given you guys a point if you'd said either Curtis or Wilford, because they do have close-ish counterparts. Still fairly different in terms of social status and like personality, but so.
Fair play. It was a good tiebreaker, if nothing else there.
Number 3. The movie doesn't exactly have a happy ending, but there is some hope. It is very different from the ending of the novel, which ends with everyone but Proloff, the protagonist in the novel, dying. Can you guess what killed off most of the remaining passengers?
It's the French. It's probably like bad cuisine or something like that. But, not just
It's
a stereotyping.
And
I'm gonna say disease. I'm gonna say like disease. Like they're like the separation of classes and the different cars. Like seems to make sense. Like kind of a War of the Worlds thing where they're not used to the microbes that would probably. I don't know how long they've been doing this shit in the book, but That's my
Okay.
answer.
Chris taking the biologist angle. What about you, Will?
I'm gonna go a little bit closer to the movie, and I'm gonna say a bomb.
A bomb. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I also would have guessed bomb if I was doing this, but Chris is actually right. It is a plague.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yay.
100% right, but close enough for government work,
Yeah,
right? Like,
I'll count it. A plague is in the class of disease, right?
Nice.
Well done. Question number 4. Will, you're still in this.
Nah.
Of the many foods only the upper class has access to in the movie, only one of those foods is also eaten by the book's upper class. Which one? And I know I phrased that weirdly, but basically there's certain foods only the upper class can eat in the movie, right?
Mhm.
Well, in the book, only one of those foods is the same.
from the film to the
Yeah.
graphic novel. Okay, gotcha.
I'm gonna say the egg.
Was also I was gonna say
Okay.
les œufs.
Are you both going with egg?
Yeah.
It is actually the fruit, which brings up the question of scurvy
of
for
course.
everyone else. But yeah, it's the fruit.
Yeah.
Interestingly, there's only 4 foods in total in the graphic novel that anyone eats. It is dead rats for the tail section.
That's an upgrade from the roaches, if you ask me.
Synthesized meat for the middle class, and then fruit and rabbit for the upper class.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
bad.
Last
No
question.
cigarettes, no tobacco, no.
That's not a food, technically.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends
All
on
right.
who you ask in France, right? Like, is that?
I was
not
gonna
part
say
of the
somewhere out
menu?
there, there's a Frenchman going, "I beg to differ."
We apologize for our stereotyping, but is it really a stereotype? Yeah.
And again, I have not read the graphic novel yet, but it is a 1982 French book. Like, I am sure there's plenty of cigarettes in it.
There's got to be tobacco on that train. Come on, 1,000 cars.
Absolutely. Probably at least like 200 of their cars are just for tobacco. I kid.
All right. Last question. True or false? Both Wilford from the movie and the engineer, his closest counterpart in the book, are obsessed with the train's engine. So true or false? Are they both obsessed with the train's engine?
I feel like this is a trick question, but I'm gonna fall for it and say yes. I say true.
Okay. Chris?
Just to be contrary, I'm gonna say false. And if I had to give a reason, I'm just gonna say false. I don't have a reason. I'm just gonna be contrarian.
Okay. Well, Will's correct. Will's on the board. Unfortunately,
Yes!
that was my last question, though.
It doesn't matter.
Sorry.
I'll take one.
So Chris wins 2-1.
Yay, 2-1.
Nice.
Congrats to both of
Well
you.
played.
Yes,
Well played, good
yes.
sir.
Yeah, a lot of that was just guessing, not even trivia, but hopefully it was fun.
Definitely.
Oh,
I look forward to next
absolutely.
week's.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, so what I'm gonna do through the magic of editing here is I'm gonna draw the card and I'll keep the footage. And then I won't reveal it until maybe next week's episode, and we can just we'll intersperse that. So, well, spliced in here, we've just now resumed, and hold on, nope, that's a lie. I have to. I'll just blur it out. I'll blur it out on the board so you can't see the category, but it's spliced in here with hopefully a nice blurry effect like over there. We have drawn a card for a guest who will be filling in for Will temporarily, not replacing because Will is irreplaceable, but it'll allow Will to have a nice little vacation. And next week, we'll be talking about Parasite. So if you haven't seen this, strap in. It's quite the ride. I would urge you not to look anything up. I think this movie is best enjoyed pure. I knew nothing about it. Just saw the poster. That was my only knowledge of the film, and it made it all the better. So would you guys agree?
100%.
Yes, but as always, I love the does the dog die site if you have
Ugh.
any particular things, especially since one of my particular triggers is in this movie and I didn't know about it.
Bugs? Was it
No.
bugs? No, I'm kidding.
No, I'll tell you
No.
after.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, that is always a good point. I would say not a bad idea. If you are prone to, everyone's got a sort of different spectrum of I guess tolerance levels and things that may bug them.
It's not bugs. I'm fine with bugs.
No, I know. Just making a dad joke. Got to squeeze one in every episode. All right. But yeah, until next time, we appreciate you tuning in and watching. Very soon, likely upon Will's return, we will reveal our new cards and categories for, at the very least, our main quest. Not the films, of course, because we like that to be a surprise. But you'll get a little sneak peek into what we have planned, and you can count on seeing more guests and audience participation moving forward. So more on that to come. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.